All right, all right, all right. What is going on? So we are going to be talking about setting up your drum room, and this is kind of a portion of the members area that I'm wanting to build on a little bit, and that's lessons that aren't specifically on, in other words, like it's not an 8-lesson track, you don't have 15 parts to it, it's, you know, it's very practical, very applicable, things that you can do now, like you can go to Home Depot or Walmart and start getting some of this stuff for cheap and making your room sound better. That's what I want this, I'm not going to call it a lesson series, it's just going to be an ongoing part of the members area at this point, and that's going to be, some of them will be shorter, some of them will be longer. So, let's start with this. A lot of times I have, what this is not is how to set up a home studio. We're not going to go into like cables and gear and, you know, all the different sound waves and measuring that. I'm going to use very practical language. I'm going to use very layman's terms. I'm going to show you some really practical things that you can do and build yourself, because here's the deal. My first studio was a garage, okay? We had a 1,200 square foot house, and then I had a 300 square foot garage, 1-car garage with cinder blocks, you know, and actually this room, I'm gonna show you this room a little bit too, with cinder blocks, you know, I don't know, 3 feet up the wall like they would be in a garage, and then drywall. And then I had to treat that, so it was just this big tunnel. And so all too often, we find that, let me see here. If you're not getting it, let's see here. If you're ever watching live streams, by the way, just in general, Chrome and Firefox are the best for those. They tend to stay up to date with things the most. And if you're not getting the feed live, then go ahead and refresh the page. I've had to do this from a very practical standpoint. The sound of a room that you're playing the drums in is very important, and here in Nashville it's even more evident because we have whole studios that are known just for their drum sounds. Like, you rent that studio out simply because you can get killer drum sounds in that room. I mean, there's some drum rooms that the ceiling is actually removable, so you can go from like a 1-story ceiling and they have like attic area up top. So what they did was they made a ceiling that rolls back almost like a garage, and you have all of this. You can get this huge drum sound. And so the sound of the room you're in, it's not the same with a bass or a guitar, because they're going direct, or they've got an amp. It's not the same. Like, they're getting that sound direct. The sound of the room for us is very important because we're working with a lot of different sound sources, a lot of brash sound sources, and sometimes I get students, as a matter of fact, a lot of time I get students that are like, my drums sound horrible, and I'll go play them, and I'm like, actually, it's not the drums that sound bad, it's the room you're in. And so we don't want the room too live, we don't want it too dead, we want to control this. So, that's kind of what you want to do. So let's talk about this a little bit. The main areas we're going to want to be looking at, right, is going to be floors, ceilings, walls, and corners. Okay, not just corners of the rooms, but also specifically the corner trap, or the tri-corner. So where the ceiling meets the actual wall, that's going to be a tri-corner. You have this on top and then that coming together. And so so you need to go ahead and look at that and kind of check out those different areas. One way real quick to go around your room and find the areas that need treatment is to have someone play the drums and just go stand in the different, not real loud, but go stand in the different parts of the room and hear how the drum sounds in that corner. Hear how it sounds in this corner. Hear how it sounds right in front of it. You know, stand on a 6-foot ladder and hear how it sounds at the top, because if we have overhead microphones over the kit, that's the sound those are catching. So we're looking at doing this, and one way you can do this by yourself is you can actually clap around the room. So you can go to the different corners and clap, and it'll be amazing. Like, this corner is much deader because I've got this stuff. I've got some things I'm going to show you because of this, and I also have this completely trapped over here. I'll show you that in just a few minutes. I'm going to kind of twist the camera around and show you some of the room I'm working with, which is a small room. It's a 10 by 11 is the room I'm in right now. And so you don't have to have a big space for it to sound good. And so we kind of want to deal with those things. So that's one way that we can find where the bad frequencies are, is by clapping around the room. Okay, you don't have to go out and buy a bunch of stuff. I'm gonna show you how to use furniture to actually treat some of your rooms. So another thing that I had to learn when treating different areas of the room was what you're trying to eliminate is the standing sound waves. So when you hit a sound source, sound waves go out, right? They go out in all directions. Now, what happens is it hits the wall. When it hits that wall, it comes back. And what it does is it hits those other sound waves. And if those sound waves hit each other directly on, you're going to get all kinds of weird overtones and frequencies. And I'm not going to get real deep into this whole standing wave. I'm not. All you need to understand is you want something that whenever the sound hits a wall, it deflects the sound into different directions. So now instead of coming, you know, where you've got sound coming here, instead of coming straight back, now you have it coming and hitting, and now it's going like this. So it's going out in all different directions. So now the next sound wave coming straight from when you're hitting the drum kit is kind of going in between those and glancing off at angles. That's where you get the different sounds and sources, okay? And so that's something I didn't understand. That's a basic of this is what's happening when you hit your drum. Now, the next thing is we don't have to treat every wall. We only need to treat 2 of the walls in a 4-wall room, okay? So if I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm gonna treat that wall, I don't necessarily have to treat this wall. If I'm going to treat that wall, I don't necessarily have to treat this wall. Why? Because you've already deflected the waves. You can treat those walls, it's totally fine, but you don't have to. So if you're looking at actually buying some stuff like some foam like this, you just need to understand that you don't have to buy it and put it on every wall everywhere. And so that's something that I didn't know whenever I first started. Let's check. I want to do something I've never done, and that's actually just kind of show you the drum room. I'm going to be a little limited because we're hooked up to HDMI, so I'm just going to kind of twist the camera around and show you the angles that I can of the room so that you can see what I'm working with here. All right, so of course you see that this is obviously the main wall. And I'll go ahead and twist this over here. Forgive me if anything goes wrong. I don't usually do this. Ah, there it goes. Okay, so here we have, this is my, the corner over here. And you'll see that I have it treated with what we would call a corner trap. And so this is acoustical foam laid at a angle like this so that it makes a small triangle on the inside of there. You'll also see over here that I've done something similar. Let me take you all the way up to the ceiling, and you'll see that it goes all the way up to the ceiling so that we get that tri-corner. See that tri-corner up there? So I've got that tri-corner. I also wanted to, if I can, gosh, I hope this doesn't come unhooked. You can see above my drum set, I have 1 row of baffling. My other 2 corners adjacent to these 2 corners, they actually have very similar to what this corner these 2 corners have as far as sound treatment goes. So that's kind of what I'm working with here. I just wanted to give you a real quick. I wish I could twist it all the way around, like all the way around the room, but it's just not possible because of the camera. And so that's what I'm working with here, all right? Let me get hooked back up here. All right, so if you're just at home and you're like, Steven, that's cool, that's awesome that you're working with that. Let's see if I can get this, there we go. That's awesome that you're working with that, but that's not gonna work for me. I don't have the money to spend into this stuff. Let's talk about some things we can do. So let's go with, we don't have any money to do anything with, I just need to use what's in the room. Okay, if you need to do that, then we're going to be using the furniture, bookcases, and rugs, things like that. So if we have a hardwood floor, then we're going to want to put a rug, obviously, under the drum kit. If you can put some kind of rug to soften that floor, it's going to be a little bit better. You don't want all of your sound sources in your room to be completely harsh. So if we can do a rug, that's going to be great. Now, with furniture, what I would start doing is, all too often I'll walk in and they're like, this is my practice room, you know, this is the, you know, for instance, our first house, my wife, Kelly, she gave me a room I could practice in. She, at first, was going to have 2 guest bedrooms, right, because everyone needs that, right? And so I said, well, you know, what am I going to do with my drums? And so she came home one day after work, and they were set up in the middle of the den. And she said, what are you doing? I said, well, I couldn't set up because we have 2 guest bedrooms, and so I just set up in the den. And she said, oh, you can have this room. So that was how I arbitraged that and got a practice room. And it's not necessarily what I suggest, but it's how I did it. And so in that first room, all too often I'll walk in, they're like, this is my practice room. It'll be like a hardwood floor and no furniture except their drum set, or carpet and no furniture instead of their drum set. So the first thing we can do is actually start dragging in some furniture, couches, chairs, put them in the corners if you can. So if you got a couch, you can shove that in the corner, and that's going to act as a semi-bass trap if you want to. If you've got bookshelves, angle them in the corner, or you can put them flat against the wall in the corner, and that way you've got somewhat of a deflection, because that's where a lot of weird sounds are going to come. Whenever you've got really weird angles, things bouncing off, that's where a lot of your weird sounds are going to come. All right, I told you I'm not going to get super technical with this. I'm going to use terms like weird sounds, okay, because that's like real life. So the furniture can be used. We can have a rug underneath the drums. Now, what if you want to deal with above the drum kit, because as well, sound's going out, it's also going up, okay, especially with cymbals, because they're hitting like this, and the sound waves, like, you got stuff happening above your head. If you don't believe it, just clap above your head and see how differently it sounds that high up. All right, and so what you can do is you can do one of 2 different things. You can hang a cheap baffle above your drum set, so very small, similar to what you saw with me. Buy a couple panels and do that. You can also make one, and so have different widths of wood. You'll see a lot of studios here in town, that's kind of a part of their decoration. They'll have one whole wall where they've got like 1-inch wood pegs, and some of them are this long, some this long. That's like all different, and it makes basically a surface that doesn't bounce the sound directly back at you. You'll see that above the drum set. A super cheap way to do it is to take a blanket and actually take tacks or brads and put that above the drum kit with a very slight pocket in it. So in other words, it's not tight against the ceiling. It's got a little bit of a hang to it, and that's going to help deflect and soften some of that sound. Whenever we clapped around this room, the reason you see the 4 panels up there, that was where we were getting a lot of weird tones, and so we found that putting those up there was really easy to go ahead and help with that. But the simplest way you can change the sound of your drum room is to bring things in there. Over in this corner, I have a stand-up piano. I've got computer, I've got monitors on this wall, I've got another corner trap there. I've got lots of different sources for the sound to kind of bounce off of. You don't want to be cluttered, but at the same time, you do want to be careful that it's not just a blank room, because you're going to get a lot of standing sound waves. All right, so if you want to go the more expensive route, this is what's called studio acoustical foam. All right, you'll notice that it's thin. You'll notice that it's ridged. They make this in different designs. You can make different designs on your wall with it. It's also expensive. And so I actually bought my studio acoustical foam secondhand. And because this stuff is like, it gets really, really expensive. And if you get into buying corner traps, bass traps, the wedges, man, you're going to pay 30, sometimes 50 bucks per like wedge. So if you want to go that route, you can do that. But if you don't want to, you can use furniture, or there's a couple of other cheap options that I've got here. So remember, if we're using acoustical foam, you don't necessarily need to cover the entire wall. Just make designs on the wall. If you want to go back and look at some of my older videos, real old videos on YouTube, you'll see I have just like a triangular design with 4 of these puppies butted up against each other. The reason I did that was because I wanted to cover more wall surface, and I didn't have to cover every single piece. What you'll do as you hang it, again, use the clap method, clap around the room and listen to, oh wow, when I clap in this area, there's like something weird happening. How can I fix that? You know, and so you know I need to put something here, I need to put something there. Let's go to the second thing you can buy, and then I'm going to show you one that you can make. If you got questions about any of this stuff, this is meant to be just low key. This is very unlike most of the lessons. It's just meant to be practical stuff you can use. So this, whenever I got into this studio, this is a panel from Auralex Acoustics, www.auralex.com. Again, gonna be a little bit pricier, but the guy that had this studio before me, somebody said, got any mounting tips for that foam? Yes, yes. I will keep your wives from killing you with, I'll tell you a story about my last studio and when we had to leave. These can get a little expensive, but the guy before me had this and it was a mix studio, so a vocal mix studio. He had some Dove Awards and things like that for different things he had worked on, and he produced a lot of vocals in this studio. So he had it outfitted, and I had as part of the, whenever we bought this place, I had as part of the deal, you leave the acoustical panels, and which he was totally fine with, because who wants to drag those everywhere with you? So that's gonna, and they don't have to be square. They can be any shape you want them to be. You don't have to hang them like this. You can hang them like this. You can make them who cares? Again, this is not a hard and set thing. And different rooms, I've gone into a room and been like, well, that's really strange. They're like, well, it's what worked. We tried a million different things, and that's what worked with the room. So don't be afraid to try different things, different textures. Let's talk about, Marcus had a great question about hanging acoustical foam. 3 different methods, why I recommend them and why I don't recommend them. So the first method I used was, I was like, hey man, this stuff's gonna be here forever. I'll use this cool stuff from Home Depot that is a spray-on sticky surface. So you spray it on there and then you stick it to the wall. And it really does work good. They really stick there. The problem being, you'll see on the back here that I have some scarring. Why do I have scarring? Because when I took this off the wall, because in fact I didn't stay there forever, it took some of the foam off and left that on the wall. And I was left with 2 walls that I completely had to resurface because the drywall was, for all intents and purposes, the surface of it was ruined. Had to scrape it all off, get degluers. It took like a week of work. So I do not recommend using the glue at this point. Why? Because there are much cheaper options, easier to remove, non-wall scarring options. What are those? One of them is the way that I mount this stuff now is actually I go get small, like those little pin nails, little brads from, you know, maybe this long from Home Depot. You pick up a whole pack of them for like $2, right? And something you would use to hang a really light picture. And I like to get the ones with a little bit of a wider head. You can get one that has a pin head, or you can get one that has a little bit wider head for hanging like a little picture. Get those, and then a studio buddy of mine taught me this, and then just tack those in the wall. And you can't see them in the acoustical foam because they'll sink into the foam, and they barely scar your wall. You're gonna have just a couple little pinholes, much better than the alternative matter. You can also, I've also seen guys use like actual push pins that you would sew with. I've seen them use those. So I would not recommend gluing this to a wall if you ever want to take them off, especially if you're doing this in your house, because you're gonna scar the walls up. The other option that I use a lot these days, I use this actually, and I got this from the guy that I bought this place from. Actually, he uses for these acoustical panels, he uses command strips. They're damage-free hanging strips. I love these things. A little bit pricier. By pricier, I mean like $3 or $4 per pack. This says they hold up to 16 pounds, 7.2 kilograms. That is a lie. They do not hold that much weight. If you put a bunch of them on there, maybe they'll hold that much weight. But also if you've got kids, like my boys love like these just posters. They have things they want to hang on their wall that are not, real heavy. I use command strips for that. Light pictures, command strips, because I can take and I can just peel them off real easy. So I've got those on this panel, and you'll see it just peels off, and it's just functions very much like Velcro functions, just much stronger. It's got a tab on it and you can actually take the tab and pull it off the wall. It won't scar. So that's how most of the acoustical panels are hung in these that I'm using. And I've got 1, 2, 3 of these on this wall, 1, 2, 3, 4 on this wall, and then I have much larger ones, so like twice that size, rectangular ones, 1 over here, and then 1 that I've built on each side here, 1 here, 2 there, 2 there. So those function as bass traps as well as the tri-corner traps. And I'm not going to go into why they're called bass traps, tri-corner traps. Just understand weird frequencies come from that area of the room. Deal with it. That's what needs to happen. Marcus is asking about mineral wool. You're ahead. I'm gonna actually show you how to build some for cheap, which Marcus and I have talked about that. You can also make these things. So I'm going to show you how to do that. An easy way to make this, okay, is to get. I'm just going to show you real quick. Is to get a piece of cardboard. This is going to be like ghetto. How to do it. Get a piece of cardboard, because that's really all this is. You see I can bend it and stuff, it's cardboard. And get a piece of like the foam that you would put on a mattress before you put the sheet on. Sometimes you lay on those mattresses. Get just a piece of that like foam you can roll out. Cut it to the same width as your cardboard, and then go to Walmart and go, somebody mentioned denim. Basically, some kind of tough fabric, and you're going to take not like I've used sheets before, but they're not as durable. Get more like a denim fabric or a textured fabric, and corduroy as well works good. And then what you'll do is you'll just cut it to this, bring it on the other side here, and that's basically what they did here, and they're a company. They fold it here, they tack it around. So like for a few dollars, you know, a couple of Amazon orders and a few dollars, you can make this with just some cheap foam that you can buy at Walmart. You can put a piece of cardboard and then some fabric that you can get for a couple dollars a yard at Walmart. That would be the cheap po man's way of doing that. And another way, the way that I did it for my first studio. Now we're here in Nashville, so Marcus is talking about mineral wool and OC703. You can write those down. Those are going to be names that this is referred to. It's also called rockwool. And what it is it's compressed insulation. So the insulation that's in your walls, they take that and they compress like this much of it into this much space. So you have a very thick, and I don't have a piece of it to show you, it's all inside of things. So my first studio, I made all of my tri-corner traps and bass traps, and I'm actually still using one over here. This guy is one that I made, and then this is one that was bought. And so what I did, and this cost, I'm trying to remember, I made 4 traps that were this size to cover basically the bottom portion of the wall. And I made, man, maybe 6 that were this size. And what I did was, these were my tri-corner traps for hanging from the ceiling. Those were my bass traps. Okay, so I was taking care of everything that was happening on the floor area where my toms, kick drum, snare, hi-hat, all of that will be. Sometimes in studios, another thing you can do is, if your wife is like, I hate those, I don't want them out here all the time, you can build something like this that I'll tell you about in just a second. And then you can use like little legs. You can get some little corner braces or whatever and have feet that come off here. And many studios here in Nashville actually have just these types of baffles that you can move around the room. So you could have a closet you can store them in, and when company leaves, pull them back out and baffle certain parts of the room, and that way they're freestanding. How do we make these? Rock wool is like any other insulation, so it's fiberglass. It's going to get all on you, all up in you. And so you want to be careful, wear gloves when you're doing this. But I had to go to an insulation store. You can order these online, and mine came in a pack of, I believe it was 2 or 3 feet by 6 feet, and I had 4 or 5 panels. So it was like really only like this thick, but it was 4 or 5 panels. And they use that, it's very common here in Nashville, so we have an insulation store that just supplies all different variations of this, because we have so many home studios, so many studios in this area that use this stuff in the walls. But what I did was I got it, and it cuts it cuts like a knife. It doesn't cut like that. I don't know why I'm saying that. It cuts like a cardboard wood or anything like that. So you can actually just cut it with a knife, and that's what I did. I cut these squares out. This is a 2 foot by 2 foot. And then I went to Home Depot and I got cheap wood, just a 1 inch, I believe it was 1 inch by 4 inches, I believe is what this is. 1 inch by 4 inch, I believe. And you can get those for a couple dollars. You can get like a 12-foot board of that, or 8-foot board. And then I cut my frames out, and you can see that's just a very cheap piece of wood underneath there. I cut my frame out, I framed it up, I shoved the rock wool in there, and then on the back side, I got really cheap fabric, so I got gray fabric. I actually even used some behind something. I'm telling like all my secrets whenever, because this is from 2009 when I first started. We had some cheap curtains, or we had some, not cheap, they were thick curtains, but they were really super ugly, that I had used to shove in a bass drum years ago, and I was like, man, I could use those because they were real thick fabric. And so that's what I did, is I actually cut those up, and so on the back of some of these, it's this really ugly, like late 90s red color. Anyway, so what I did was I shoved that in all around and used a staple gun to make sure it's in there. And then I took, this is black sheets. I wouldn't recommend buying sheets. I would just go buy it by the yard. Black sheets from Walmart, the cheapest I could find. This is like, I'm telling on myself here. I started this thing like bootstrapping from the ground up. I didn't borrow money or anything like that to start the business that I currently have. So it's been just built with cash from the ground up. So I was working with very limited resources. I bought the types of sheets that you would buy if you were a college student at Walmart. I think they were $8 for a set of them, and they were basic black. And they've worked great. I would go like up a step and pay, you know, a couple dollars more at this point to get the deeper denim style. And I like to, in my studios, I like to go black or gray. I like to go some neutral color. So, because it's not really something you're wanting noticed. It's not a decoration. It's simply for sound. Then I took that, I cut it, I wrapped it around, and you can see here, I wrapped it around, tucked it in here, stapled it with a staple gun. I made all of those, so 4 corner traps that were 4 foot by, I believe, 2 feet, 4 of them that were 2 feet by 2, 6 of them that were 2 feet by 2 feet, and I think all of that in insulation, wood, materials, it all cost me, I think around $150, no more than $200. And so you can do this for really cheap. This corner trap, the way I hung these in the corners, because you don't want it flat against the corner necessarily. You want it to have a little bit of a gut out. And so the way I hung these was I put small hooks. You can see them once flattened out, 'cause this is my extra. It's been in storage. I hung this, and then I put a small like garden hook in the ceiling about a foot out from the tri-corner where the walls came together and the ceiling came together, about a foot and a half out from that. And then I ran a wire across there, and I hung that from the wire, and then I actually just kind of propped it up on the wall, because nobody's ever going to touch it. It's up on the ceiling. I propped it up on the wall like this, and it was my corner trap, and it just hung at an angle like this, and it worked fantastic. So rock wool. It's called rockwool mineral wool, or OC703. So you can get all of that. Really expensive route, go ahead and do these. They work great. A little bit expensive, but you can also make these. This would be the Poe Man if you want to make it with cardboard and some very small insulation or cushioning that you can do, and then cover it with some fabric that you buy by the yard at Walmart, or, you know, whatever your local sewing store is. And then if you want to go a little bit sturdier, and you'll see this can stand on the floor because it's square, so I can set this, I can move it around the room and set it wherever I want. So if you're recording in your home as well, you can use these as movable baffles around the drum kit. So that's how we're going to be dealing with the walls. If you have questions, please put those in there. If you have somebody, Marcus is saying, I've read a bunch about acoustical transparent cloth for traps and panels. Have you found that to make a big difference? So here's the deal. I don't cut #1 albums out of this studio. For my uses, no, not a big difference. For my, and we can go back and forth and talk about how pure the sound waves are. I just go from what I'm hearing, and you know, I've seen some studios spend some really big dollars on things, and their drum room sounds. I've seen home drum rooms sound that good with like couches and stuff in there. So I really do think it's all. This is an area that you can spend a lot of money in. And now understand, we're talking about sound treating the room. This isn't. This is sound treatment, okay? So this is the actual room that you're in, that you're treating. I think many of you will be surprised that if you treat the room that your drums are in, it's gonna make a big difference. Some other simple things we can do is hang curtains. So even if you don't have a window in the room and you don't want it to look odd that you've hung curtains, hang a curtain rod and hang curtains on the curtain rod. It'll look like a window, but you have these big, thick curtains coming down, and that way, if you want a harsher sound, you can, studios in Nashville have this as well. They'll have a curtain that goes across the whole wall, so if they want to deaden the whole wall, it's a real thick curtain, they'll take and they'll pull that over. If they don't, they'll pull that completely back, and they have a different sound source underneath there. So you don't have to have a window to hang curtains, because once you hang the curtains, it looks like there's a window there with curtains drawn, okay? That's what that means. Tim is asking, any tips on soundproofing? You might cover that in an alternate class. Maybe you could share a few picks on your overall studio as well. Yeah, so there's a difference between soundproofing and sound treating. And soundproofing is a whole, sound treatment is all about the sound within the room, okay? So that's the sound that's happening within the room. Soundproofing is all about the sound that's happening outside of the room. So we're trying to keep sound from escaping from the room. And I probably will save that for another video, because we can get into a whole mess of things with that. I'll give you some quick tips though. Anywhere that air is escaping, sound's going to escape. So many times people don't realize that the sound escaping from their room is coming from their ceiling, because you know, they're playing drums and the only thing above them is an attic, but they don't use that attic space, so it's a bunch of empty space, and that's where the sound's getting out. Because there's no insulation up there. It's different things. Your door, the cracks in your door, a lot of sound are going to come from there. I found that oftentimes closing up the bottom of the door and then putting some weather stripping on the door's edges really reduces the sound. As well, covering a hollow door with acoustical foam works. Even better, getting a solid door, like a solid wood door, and covering that with acoustical foam. The other thing I will say about treating a room, windows are going to be a problem with sound treatment and soundproofing. Samuel is asking, after treating your space, did you find that there were certain frequencies that remain hard to tame? Yes, which is, we've got to do something about this, because my overheads are, if you can see my fingers, my overheads are about, if my fingers are right here, right there, okay, no, yep, there. So my overheads are about a foot and a half from here. There's treatment on this wall and this wall, but there's no treatment on this wall, and I've got a monitor and a little treatment over here, but if I get weird frequencies in here, it happens up there, and you can almost hear the echo. I don't know if you can hear, I can hear it in my in-ears. Once I get down here, it changes. It starts getting weird right about there. And we're soupy, crash, crash, crash. I'm getting a lot of slap back. And yes, once you have your room, there will be certain frequencies that are going to give you an issue. But that's almost a fun troubleshooting thing if you're a nerd, because, and I'm not, I just have some friends that are, because then you can go through and figure out, okay, that's that one frequency, how can we reduce that frequency? The other thing I wanted to touch on before getting out of here has to do with soundproofing and sound treatment. So we can go both there. If you got any questions, shoot those in. I'll stay as long as I need to answer your questions about this, because this is something that nobody ever taught me. Had to learn all this from the ground up, and I'm not a master at it. The only advantage I have is I'm real world. Like, no, that doesn't work, or yeah, that works, or you spent a buttload of money and you could have just gone and bought some cardboard and put some, you know, fabric on it, like that kind of a thing. These, you know, whenever people talk, I told you just how to make this one, and yeah, they probably made it out as super optimized acoustical, whatever, you know. Seriously though, you can make this thing for way less than it was bought, but this very thin piece of flexible material, this guy, Dove Award-winning albums, like multiple awards. I was going through the house and I'm like, oh, this guy's a musician. Oh, okay. He's done some stuff, right? Which is kind of funny now in our town, they actually own the local coffee shop now. And so I walked in one day and I'm like, hey, I know you guys. They're like, yeah, I recognize you too. I'm like, she said, I think you bought our house. I'm like, I did buy your house. Anyway, okay, so, Windows. Windows is gonna be another big thing. Somebody's asking, what is the back of this made of? I told you the poor man's way. The back of this is actually made of, it's just cardboard, man. This is almost like poster board. I was working with something like this. That would be actually excellent. Cheap poster board like you would make like your science project for school on. It feels like that inside there. Like it just feels like poster board. The thick poster board, you know, like the kind you would, you know, carry to class or whatever. I just had to work with that with one of my kids, and so that's why it reminded me of that. So probably even cheaper than a box is just get poster board. And then just a thing of foam like you'd roll out over a bed, and then, you know, I mean, seriously, you could probably make this thing. Well, I mean, that's the thing. You have to add in the cost of buying all these materials in bulk. So, I mean, you could probably make all of these for all in, like $50. You could make a buttload of these, you know. I've never sat there. I've never, until I'm doing this lesson, I'm like, what is this actually made out of? It would not be hard to replicate, although I'm sure they've sound optimized it and all that stuff that they advertise with. I'm telling you, you can get it just as good of a sound. Windows. The biggest thing you can do for them is curtains. You don't want just glass is really, really a harsh surface. I played at a venue here in town, and the whole back of the stage, Jack Daniel's Saloon in the Opry Hotel, which is this huge hotel that's here. It's got like 5 areas. It would take you like 3 hours to walk through the thing. It's got gardens, and people go there just to see the hotel. And we were playing in the Jack Daniel's Saloon, and this was when I first moved to town, and the whole back of the stage was just mirrors. So glass is really hard to tame, but well worth it. Windows, something I've done before. So the windows, if you don't need to use the window, here's what I would suggest doing. If you're gonna be in there, get some thick curtains and put that in there. If you want to reduce the sound for your neighbors, this is the #1 thing you can do if you have a room with windows and you've got a neighbor complaining. You need to deal with the window, okay? So putting in a high quality window that's actually going to be, you know, try to keep any window that advertises that it keeps street noise out, guess what? It's gonna keep your house noise in too. So those are great windows. So you can be like, honey, you know, the street's just super loud. Like I can't even sleep. I can hear it 3, you know, rooms down. You know, work that angle and get a new window and it'll work for you too. But what you can do is, in my old studio it was part of the house, I had 2 windows, and I had one of the neighbors came over, and she's like, my daughter can't go to sleep at night because you're playing the drums. You know, I'm like, I don't play them past 8:30, so I'm pretty sure she's lying, but I don't want to call your daughter a liar. But also, I've been up to that part of the cul-de-sac, and it's not that loud. But you always want to play nice with your neighbors with a smile on your face, so I spent some money. I got that compressed insulation, the rockwool, or we were calling it several different things. I want to get all the names so that you understand. Mineral wool, or OC 703. I took that and I actually cut it to the size of the window, and I shoved it in the window and completely insulated the window. You can do this with regular insulation too. And what I did on the back side of it was I tacked up a white sheet on the back side of it, so it looked like the back side of a curtain was hanging there. And then I filled that with insulation, and then I actually put a board over that and caulked around the board, painted it the same color as the wall, and I hung curtains over it. So it still looked like there was a window there. It was just closed off, and it was, for all intents and purposes, now walled in. So you can do that. I would be careful, though, because when I took that off there, there was some sun damage to the drywall, so you may have to repaint. There's also a little bit of sun damage to the window, I'm sure, because it just got hot in there. So just if you make those kind of changes, understand that if you keep them for 3 or 4 years, that may be an issue. But a way around this is, the 5-year-old throwing the drummer on the bus. You know, she was standing there talking to me, and I wanted to be like, look, I'm pretty sure that she just doesn't want to go to sleep, and she's saying that my drumming 8 houses down the street, which is bothering no one else in the neighborhood, is the reason she can't go to sleep. I'm pretty sure your daughter just wants to be up past 9. But, I mean, I have kids, though, so I get, like, for the 18th time, you're like, if you get up again, I'm going to have to staple your shirt to the headboard, and you have to stay there. What you can do is get a piece of light plywood, or you could also do what we were talking about, that cardboard stuff. Cut the rock wool to be the size of the window, and then have some of this adhesive stuff on the corners. So cut the actual poster board, or I'm losing all my words, or wood that you get about this much longer than the actual window. Have that frame around. Put the insulation in the middle so that it covers up all of your window, and then whenever you practice, you can pull that off the floor, put it on there. If you put some of these command strips on there, that'll just tack it and hold it in place. The insulation will go into that window, and it'll kind of cover that up. When you're done practicing, just pull that off. You're still going to have some sound escaping, so it's not going to be a perfect situation, but that is a way you can deal with windows. The best way is to hang some curtains. If you don't have a window and you don't want to spend a bunch of money on treating a wall, then you can literally create some windows by just hanging some thick curtains with a curtain rod, and just make it look like there's 2 windows in that room that has no windows. So that's going to be some very simple, effective ways to treat corners, to treat the walls, treat it with furniture. You know, the first thing I always suggest to people if the room sounds bad is get a rug if it's hardwood, and drag some furniture in there. You know, if you have a studio where you teach kids, a lot of you I know are teachers, put a couch in there. Anything you can put in there that's going to give you some different sound sources to work with is going to be good. And then from there, let's go to treat the corners. Let's treat 2 of the 4 walls. Let's look above the ceiling. There's different, you know, cheap ways to treat that. And then look at treating the door. All of those things are going to help. So, and the way that you test the room, simply walk around and clap and get close to your claps. And train your ear to hear, okay, I see. Do it at night when it's real quiet. Train your ear to hear, oh wow, when I hit up here, there's echoes. When I hit down here, there's none. Oh wow, okay. Kelly came into my studio one day and she was talking to me. She was, you know, telling me something going on with the kids. And I was standing at my computer and she's talking. All of a sudden she stops and she's like, why does it sound like my voice is right here? I was like, it's because the studio is treated and I need it to sound good. She's like, I don't like it. You know, it's like all of a sudden the movie editor right in front of you, coming soon to a theater near you. Anyway, that's going to be good ways that you can treat rooms for cheap. It's going to be sound treatment. It is not soundproofing. We will definitely cover that in another video where we can talk about some practical ways to soundproof and different things like that. So if you guys dig, guys and gals, dig this one-off type of a lesson, let me know, because I want these to be, and some of them are going to be much shorter. This got a little bit longer because I was just demonstrating some things, but like I want them to be applicable. This is literally, you can go soundproof, not soundproof, you can sound treat your room today for like free or $50, and you can sound treat the whole thing, you know, with the poor man's way. So there's several different ways to do that. But anyway, that's going to be it. If you got questions, you can always email me. Visit the forums, put them in there. That way, there's some great conversation going on the chat board, and those are always great. You can take those to the forum and just make like, hey, what's everybody's experience with, you know, sound treating rooms, and then you're going to have a lot of guys that have dealt with a lot of different situations. I know somebody just built a complete small building out in the back of their yard that we were just talking about the other day, that they're in the lessons, and that it was just for drumming. You know, he's got a window unit, small, like, that's awesome to do those types of things, and then learn how to sound treat it for very cheap with plants, and plants are another one that's great, with plants and furniture and pictures and curtains, and then getting a little bit more expensive as you go. So awesome. I will see you guys in the next lesson. Go practice.